And welcome once again to Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr. Joining me as he always does is Juan Zarate. He's our national security analyst. Juan, good to see you.
Bob, great seeing you.
So the president has pledged to degrade and destroy ISIS. And so far we know about air power. The French have now joined with the airstrikes. We know about trying to put together a ground coalition of the Syrian Free Army and maybe the Iraqi forces.
Right.
But you have to have intelligence, and it seems to me that that's the point no one's talking about.
Yeah, we're playing catch up here, Bob, in terms of intelligence gathering. For a number of years now, we've had a big gap in terms of our understanding of what's going on the ground in Syria. A lot of the fault lines and fissures between the groups, what territory they control, how the forces have been operating. And then we've been absent in Iraq, and that has meant not having sort of eyes and ears on the ground, understanding the dynamics, understanding the players. One of the advantages of the surge period in Iraq back in 2007 was you had American troops on the ground, American intelligence that really understood in depth what the networks looked like that we were fighting, the Al-Qaeda and Iraq networks, and allowed then the forces to degrade them. And so the bottom line here, Bob, is that the long pole in the tent for the ability to degrade and destroy this group is to have good intelligence, granular intelligence that allows us to target and to strike, whether it's in Iraq or Syria, and then those targets allow us to determine what's happening on the ground for purpose of cutting off their financing and creating coalitions on the ground.
What is your sense of what our ground capability is there in terms of intelligence? Because we know U.S. assets have been greatly diminished since we left Iraq. We know we're getting some help from other places, the Jordanians and others, but how good is our visibility?
It's not great, but it's getting better and can improve quickly for a couple of reasons. One, I think on the Iraqi side, we can rebuild the ties quickly with the Iraqi military that we had long-standing ties with, helped build. Certainly with the Kurdish Peshmerga, which have natural affinities to working with the United States, that can be very helpful. And certainly as we build this coalition, having greater focus by the Jordanians, the Turks, other allies on the ground to be able to understand clearly what's happening. That can happen. It's not going to happen overnight, but you have to build that reservoir of intelligence to allow us to be effective. And if we're suggesting, as the president has, that this is going to be a long-term effort, you have to then start building the infrastructure for long-term intelligence gathering.
So in the near term, tactically, if you have to hit key positions inside Syria, you have to have critical intelligence, right? You have to know where and when.
Right. You have to know not only who you're hitting, but when they're going to be there, why you're going to hit particular sites, right? Part of this is the military trying to plan strategically which sites to hit and when. And part of this has to do with degrading the ability of these groups, whether it's ISIL or Al-Qaeda groups, to be able to not only fight and plot in the region, but also to send foreign fighters abroad. And so American counterterrorism officials in the military are going to be looking for that strategic and tactical information that will allow them to target properly and to get ahead of the curve.
As this campaign unfolds, we might be able to tell how good our intelligence is.
That's right. I think over time we'll tell if we're hitting the right targets, if it's really doing damage to ISIL and their allies. And I think good strikes, good intelligence often leads to better intelligence. And so the enemy will have to react, they'll expose themselves, and that will leave them vulnerable to further intelligence gathering and maybe even strikes.
Obviously a story we'll have to keep on top of. Juan, thanks as always.
Thank you, Bob.
And thanks to you for watching Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr. We'll see you next time.